Hey guys, this is Paul Lynch. I'm an anesthesiologist and interventional pain management physician from Scottsdale, Arizona. Many of you have followed me over the last year. Early on when COVID hit, I went to New York City and worked in the ICUs there and kind of saw firsthand how COVID, how big of a deal it was and how it was killing so many people. And then when I came back to Arizona, I've tried to do weekly educational videos for some of my followers just to tell you what's going on, what we should expect. It's kind of turned into bi-weekly. I run a busy pain management practice here in Arizona. I don't always have a time, but I am trying to at least a couple times a month continue to get in front of you and educate. For some of you who follow me, I got blocked by Facebook a couple of weeks ago, which was a new experience for me. I've talked several times this year about censorship and my take on it, but hadn't actually been blocked myself, but my video was flagged for misinformation. And so I think today, I've actually asked my friend Austin Hamilton to come in and join us.
Thanks
again.
for having me.
Thank you for your help, Austin. We're actually using your studio, so we appreciate kind of increasing the production value of some of my videos.
Absolutely.
But we've brought Austin into this conversation, and we're going to talk a little bit about why I got blocked and maybe get into censorship a little bit. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? And I'm going to double down and tell Facebook, yeah, if you think it's misinformation, let me present a little more data on my opinions. And we're going to get into some good stuff today. But I think, as usual, I'm going to start with the data, where we're at today and where we think we're going. And then, Austin, you're going to ask me some questions. Some of these questions are the same ones that I tried to answer a couple weeks ago that got blocked. So I want to make sure that my viewers get to hear some of this because it's some important information like, when do you go to the hospital when you're at home with COVID? I mean, this is important stuff that I want people to hear. And, Facebook decided to block it. So I'm going to come back again and try to answer some of these questions and see how controversial I am today. So let me jump into the data. So as I like to do, I love the worldometers.info website. I want to start with the world. We have about 100 million cases reported in the world so far. Now, everyone keep in mind, that number is a lot higher. That's how many have been reported. That means someone got a test and it was actually confirmed. There was 100 million cases and over 2 million deaths. I've been using this 3-to-1 ratio. Whatever you see in the United States is about 3 times. But if you look in the world, it might be more like a 5-to-1 or 7-to-1 ratio because we're not testing as much around the world. So probably it's more like at least 500 million people have been infected with the coronavirus so far. That's insane, thinking about where we were a year ago in our bubbles and watching football and going to the Super Bowls. And today, how much our lives have changed 500 million cases later. If you look at deaths, we had about 14,000 deaths reported yesterday. In the United States, you can sort by country. There's all sorts of ways to sort. I like looking at things by death per million or cases per million. But the United States led the way with 4,005 deaths yesterday, which is very, very sad. This is digging into the United States data. On the good side, we had 113,000 cases. And if you remember, Austin, we looked at this data like a month ago, and we were like 250,000 cases in a day. So this is cut in half in cases. We're down to 113,000, but the death rates are just about as high as they've ever been. We peaked on deaths probably 2 weeks ago, but it's just been a slow kind of plateau. We really haven't started falling yet on death rates, and there's still a ton of patients in our hospitals, and we're still going to see a lot of deaths. If you look at Arizona, you can sort this by state. Arizona had 214 deaths yesterday, which was 4th most in the country, and today we reported another 176. The day before that, it was like 240. So Arizona's just getting hit harder. Over the last 7 days, we're the number 1 highest death rate per capita in the United States, which is not something that we want to be the best at. So a lot of deaths right now, a lot of sadness. On the good side, Austin, and for all my viewers at home, definitely we've peaked as far as cases. It looks like we peaked, we were saying maybe the last week of December, but the new peak looks like it got moved out more like the first couple of weeks of January, and that there's a lot of reasons behind that.
And that's the day I got it, January 10th,
yeah.
Right there on the peak.
We're going to talk about that a little bit, about your experiences, especially when we get to the section on when should you go to the hospital. Did you ever feel like you needed to go to the hospital?
No, I didn't. I had basically my main symptoms were fever, mild chills, and aches, but it was all manageable. Never did I feel like, oh my gosh, I need help, right? So
That's one of the crazy things about this disease, right? You're young and healthy, take good care of yourself, exercise, and it didn't hit you that hard. But someone who's 70 years old or 75 years old, it can kill you very quickly.
Yeah,
And so,
absolutely.
okay, so we peaked probably a couple weeks ago, and rapidly we've gone. This is a 7-day rolling average. We've gone from 250,000 cases a day down to yesterday we reported 140,000 cases a day, so almost cut in half. So that's the good news. As we talked about, we're still having lots of deaths right now. One thing that I like to track recently, and I want to show you guys, is vaccinations. More and more of the public is starting to accept that vaccinations make sense. The most recent poll show over 70% of people now say they're going to get vaccinated. And I like to feel like I've maybe been part of that with some of these videos and telling people it's safe and it makes sense. And I've been vaccinated. But now over 70% are saying they would get vaccinated, which is a good thing. But I really want to start tracking how we're doing. So here's a nice graphic that I'll put a link below on how many people have been vaccinated in each country around the world and how many have been vaccinated as a percent. So if you look down here on total vaccinations, the United States is up to 33.8 million, so over 10% of our population. That might sound like a lot, and it's pretty good. But what I want to show is there are some countries like Israel.
Yeah, what's Israel doing?
So they have vaccinated 60% of their country in just like 45 days.
Wow.
It's really incredible. And they're doing it by running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week vaccination centers. Just picture of like Amazon was running the vaccination program. There's lots of memes around the internet that say that. But honestly, that's what needs to happen. Big companies like Amazon need to get involved. And they've actually told the federal government they would help. And I think that stuff like that is in the works. But in Israel, now keep in mind, it's a smaller population, 6 or 7 million people. But they've vaccinated 60% of the people in 45 days by running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in a coordinated effort throughout the country. We've got to get more coordinated. I'm going to talk about that a little bit today. I think we're doing a pretty good job in Arizona. I've actually gone on the news the last couple of days talking about our efforts in Arizona, but we can step it up. We can do better, and we need to, because if we could have vaccinated 60% of our country in the first 45 days, I mean, Austin, it would save hundreds of thousands of lives. These are real lives. And so anyways, I'm going to put some links that you guys can start to track the vaccination efforts. And I'm going to tease this for later. For us to really get back to normal, we have to vaccinate. On my last video that got blocked, I said 65% of people. It might be as much as 75% of people that either get vaccinated or get coronavirus for us to get back to normal. And I'm going to dig into that in a minute. But we should all be checking these numbers. I do want to continue to push this concept of excess deaths so no one gets complacent. This is a web graphic from Our World in Data. Here below in gray and black show every year over the last 5 years how many people died each week. And it averages 50 to 60,000 people that die in any given week in the United States. And in 2020 is the red line. And you can see every single week way above the average. And this is the concept of excess deaths. This tail over on the far right is going to go much higher as we calculate all the deaths. It takes about 8 to 12 weeks for the CDC to get a death certificate to determine the person actually died and put it in their system. Keep in mind, this isn't COVID deaths. This is deaths from all causes across the United States, and it's off the charts in December, January, now going into February. And so I just continue to show this because there's lots of concepts going around the internet that the same amount of people died in 2020 as the years before, and that's just not true. 2020 is a standalone year. It's probably 300,000 to 400,000 more dead. And if what's more important is going to be probably April 1 to April 1. So if you look at April 1 of 2020 to April 1 of 2021, we're going to probably have somewhere around 700 to 800,000 more dead than predicted. That's just crazy to think about that many deaths. And so I'm going to put a link to this below as well. And then I just want to show differently the amount of daily deaths. We were all feeling really good back in October. 700 people were dying a day from COVID. It was still a lot, but then as it peaked this fall, we're hitting 3,000 or 4,000 dead per day. I'm going to show the Arizona data real quick and a few more things, and I'm going to get into some questions. So this is today's data. They actually was just released about an hour ago. We had 176 people dead in Arizona yesterday. And Austin, I'm going to ask you this question. What percent of Arizonans were positive for COVID yesterday?
10.
So right here it says in really big
14.
Right. So that's the obvious answer, but it's not true. I continue to criticize Arizona for this, all due respect to the people. It says 14%, but that's total percent positive all the way back to March of last year.
Since we started testing.
Right. So it's kind of a useless
Right.
metric. What we really should be tracking, what all the epidemiologists say we should be tracking, is 4,400 divided by 15,400. So we had 4,400 cases yesterday or today and 15,000 reported. I did the math. It's 29% positive.
Yeah.
That's still really, really
So it'd be helpful
bad.
if they had both, maybe.
It would.
Total
It would.
percent.
And I've been
positive
lobbying
since March, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, actually, positive since March is useless.
Okay.
There's no reason to put that up there.
Yeah.
It's only put up there to make us feel like it's better than it is,
Yeah.
which it's not. So even though numbers are coming down, we have a 29% positivity rate, which means most of the people, or not most, but a lot of the people that went in to get tested had it. We want that number less than 10. Once we get less than 10%, means it's really starting to dissipate in our society, which it hasn't done yet. So I just want to point that out. I'm going to show one more thing from the CDC, and then I'm going to take some questions that I tried to answer when I was blocked. So this is a new graphic that I want to put in the links below, which is the CDC has started actually estimating how many people have had COVID. And so I've been doing this on some of my talks on the IHME website data where they'll show estimated cases. The CDC has started doing that. And so the CDC, right on their website, showed that they believe we've had 83 million Americans that have got COVID. 83 million. So remember, we showed you the data earlier. It was 27 million cases reported. But the CDC says it's about triple that, which is the number I've been using for a long time. So you can triple whatever is reported for the actual number. The CDC is saying 83 million, which works out nicely. That's exactly 25% of our population. The reason I say it's nice is because I'm going to do some math later that's kind of hard to follow on how many people we need to vaccinate to get back to normal, to get to herd immunity. And so I want us to remember that about 25% of people have already got COVID. For my assumptions, I'm going to say that those people probably won't get it again. Now, they could. We don't completely know, but I still kind of believe once you've got it, I would think for at least a year or so, you're not going to get it again, at least not mathematically, that it would be common. And so 83 million or 25% of America has contracted COVID. What a deal. I am going to show one last thing, and then we're going to get into questions. This is the IHME website. I continue to follow this as a measure of what's going on. And it's kind of bad news over the last couple of weeks. You know, I was really kind of bullish on our ability to knock down COVID in early December. And I made some videos talking about we're rolling out the vaccines and how we were going to crush this virus. And a couple of things happened over the last 45 days, Austin. One, our vaccination rollout in December was really bad. It was really slow. And two, 3 separate variants emerged around the world, one in the United Kingdom, one in South Africa, and now one in Brazil. And all of these variants, the data's still out. Like, we are rapidly scrambling and trying to figure out what the story is, but they all look like they spread faster, that they've increased the R0 of the disease, which means the amount of people you infect, and potentially are more lethal. And so this has been kind of a bad turn of events. And so this is a graphic that I showed. You could actually go back and watch my video in early December, and it showed rapidly falling off. And what it's showing now is just kind of a slow meandering down. The dark purple line, third from the top, is our best estimate of what's going to happen. And so you can see it is coming down, but in April, they're still estimating 200,000 cases a day. Now, that's actual, not reported. So we might only be reporting 60, 70, but the real number will be more like 200. And then it does show that we start getting back to fairly normal by like May. But basically what's happened is a lot of my projections are getting pushed out a month or 45 days or 2 months because these variants are spreading faster. And that means the R0's higher. And if the R0's higher, then a larger portion of society either needs to get the disease or get vaccinated for us to get back to normal. And I'm going to get to that on one of the questions today.
So we are coming down.
We are coming down.
Just not as quickly as you had originally predicted.
I would think about it, if you go skiing, it's more like you're skiing a green slope as opposed to how that was going to be like a black, like straight down.
Yeah.
And so, and the other thing I want to point out to all the viewers at home, there is a massive difference between universal mask and best prediction right now. And so this green line is universal mask, and it's getting to the point where we could save hundreds of thousands of lives just over the next 3 months if we really get serious about wearing masks. I saw a lot of people making fun of the concept of wearing 2 masks, but wearing 2 masks actually is evidence-based, or getting an N95. I encouraged over the last couple of videos, if you can research online and just pay a little extra money and get an N95, it's going to filter out more of the particles. If everyone was wearing N95s, we would really reduce it. Or you can wear 2 masks. People like to make fun of that, but 2 masks work better than 1. And so here, I'm going to put a link to this below, but the estimates are getting worse for a variety of reasons that I discussed there. Okay, so I tried to answer 13 questions in my last video that got blocked, and the big one was about gain-of-function research in the Wuhan lab. And so we are going to get into that a little bit again today. But Austin, if you want to come into the conversation, the way we'd set it up, these are all actual questions that got sent to me over the last couple of weeks on social media or whatever. And so I tried to answer them. And so I think we could go through some of these questions.
Yeah, so we'll get to the gain-of-function research, but piggybacking off the data, when can we get back to normal?
Okay, so that's the $1 million question. And what's crazy is just even from 2 weeks ago when I tried to answer this question, I'm changing my numbers. And I'm changing it based on the best available evidence today. Said differently, I was wrong before. And so,
like a good scientist.
Like a good scientist. Thank you.
You have new data, and now you're making a new conclusion.
Thank you. I'm really glad that you said it that way, because in the beginning, I got all these questions like, we can't trust the CDC, we can't trust Fauci, we can't trust scientists, but we need to get comfortable with the concept that the whole idea of science is that we know we're wrong all the time, and we're constantly testing and checking and getting better, and questioning the status quo is very scientific. And so even from 2 weeks ago, I'm going to change my numbers based on this new variant and based on some speeches from the CDC and listen to Dr. Fauci and some other epidemiologists. So I want to try to teach this concept, and then I'm going to get into the numbers. The R naught of coronavirus has been believed to be around 3. And so this should be fairly easy to understand. That means you're going to give it to 3 other people. So when you got it a couple weeks ago, you probably gave it to, or there were 3 people you
my
exposed.
wife and my 2 kids.
There you go.
Yeah.
So that's the R naught. For the coronavirus to stop spreading, we need to get the R naught less than 1. Okay? So that means you need 2 of those 3 people to be immune and the virus stops spreading. And that's where we got the concept of 65% or 66% of the United States either needs to get the coronavirus or get vaccinated for the spread to stop. Is 3 people you expose, 2 are immune, it's less than 1, it stops spreading. That's the science.
That makes sense.
Well, what if the R naught's 5? If the R naught is 5, then 4 out of 5 people, or 80%, need to get exposed or vaccinated for it to stop spreading. And that's what we're afraid of right now, is the R naught could be as high as 5 with these new variants. The R naught can also be 5 when people have risky behavior, like going to a football game. And I'll just say for my Christian friends too, or going to church. That's a hard concept to think about, but going in a room with 200 people around without a mask is a super spreader event. And the R naught in that environment is 5 or 6 or 7 or 8. And so if the R naught's 3, then 65% of people have to get it. But if the R naught's 5, then 80% of people. And so my estimates to answer the question when we get back to normal today are not based on 65%, or based on 75%. And so I did some math for you guys, which is 75% of the United States, and I just make that number up. I listened to some talks and I looked at Fauci's interviews, and he's saying he thinks it's more like 75%. It could be 80 to my concept of 5, or it could be 85, but I think probably 75 is a good number for right now that's conservative and fairly evidence-based. So at 75%, we know we have 83 million Americans. So I'm going to walk you through the math. So there's 332 million Americans in the United States. 75% either have to get COVID or get vaccinated. 75% times 332 million is 249 million people. So 249 million people either have to get COVID or they have to get vaccinated. There's already been 83 million. So 249 million minus 83 million is 166 million or so people that need to be vaccinated. But here's the problem. We don't know which ones had COVID and which ones didn't, because so many people were asymptomatic. So you actually take the 166 million, divide it by 0.75, which is 221 million vaccination doses that we have to roll out. Now, everyone's been talking about 1 million doses a day, but you know what the real number's been?
What is it?
1.35 million over the last week.
Oh, wow.
1.35. We're beating estimates. So we're actually doing really good in January. So 1.35 million. I believe that number is going to go to 1.5 million. And we could even go higher if we do what Israel is doing, if we get serious. But let's just say 1.5 million. 221 million people that have to get vaccinated starting today, divide by 1.5 is 147 days. I did a calculator on my Google on how many days, how far out 147 days is from today. It's July 1st. 2021.
Okay.
So to answer your question in a very long-winded way, it's not May 24th anymore, which is what I said 2 weeks ago. It's July 1st. We have herd immunity, and we get back to fairly normal.
So that seems very scientific and data-driven, and I can follow that. Probably a 13-year-old could follow that. We were talking before we started recording. You want to explain things in such a way that it's easy to understand. But looking at the data, looking at what needs to happen in order to get herd immunity, I mean, July 1. So
yeah,
it sounds like there's, the way you're explaining this to me, there's a lot more confidence behind that number based on the vaccine rollout, which that's data that you didn't really have about a month ago, right?
Yeah, and I think people say we're moving the goalposts, and it's not intentionally. The virus is mutating and getting worse. The virus is moving the goalpost. What we're trying to do is constantly study and see what's going on, and the goalposts are going out a little bit, but July 1 is still achievable. And by the way, we can do better. We can do better in 2 or 3 ways. Number 1, we all wear masks. Number 2, we continue socially distance. Number 3, we get freaking vaccinated. And 4, I think if the government doubles down, goes to Israel, looks at what they're doing, and try to implement something here in the United States, we could do this quicker. We could do this by May, but we got to be serious about it.
Okay, so question. There's 2 ways that we can get this herd immunity. 1 is more people are getting it. 2 is more vaccines, right? And I'm not suggesting we don't wear masks, but for the sake of argument, if we really ramp up our mask wearing, in theory, less people are going to just get the disease, meaning that the way to stop it is only, I say that loosely, from vaccinations, right? So how do you balance that? Because people are going to keep getting it.
Yeah, there's 2 ways to get it. 1, you get it naturally and you have a 1% chance of dying, or 2, you get it from a vaccine and you have a 0% chance of dying. And so we want as many people to get this from the vaccine and not from getting it naturally, because if you're getting it naturally, then we're going to continue to kill people at 1% clip.
When you say you can get the virus from the vaccine, or you're saying getting the antibodies from it?
Sorry, so immunity. We're talking about immunity. So you can get immunity from either getting the virus, which might kill you, or getting the vaccine, which won't. And I keep pointing this out to people when they talk about safety. So far in all the studies, no one died from the coronavirus who got the vaccine. Like, it's almost 100% guaranteed if you get a vaccine, you're not going to die from the coronavirus.
So let's talk about that. So is the vaccine safe?
Oh, yes. And so I'm getting more and more confident every month that goes by. People who are getting vaccinated are doing great. And so people who get vaccinated do not die from the coronavirus. The data showed 95% reduction in your chance of getting symptomatic coronavirus. It showed 0% of those people died, and it's shown so far there's no long-term consequences. Now, 25 years from now, could you grow a third eye? Maybe. I don't know. I can't scientifically tell you what's going to happen 25 years from now.
You might get banned by Facebook again.
Right. Oh, yeah. I'm going to get blocked. But what we know so far, based on all this data starting in like May, June, July, there's no bad long-term consequences from the virus or from the vaccine.
Yeah, and so you've talked about the vaccine a lot in other videos, but yes, the vaccine is safe.
It's safe, and it's going to save a lot of lives, and it's going to help us get our economy back and get back to normal and go to sporting events and go to church without masks again. I mean, our lives are going to get back to normal eventually, and the vaccine is going to be a big part of that. We have 71% of Americans now that want to get vaccinated. That needs to probably go to 75 or 80, I think, for us to really get our goals.
Yeah. Okay, so if I get the vaccine, or if someone gets a vaccine, when should they go to the hospital?
Oh, so the virus, you mean?
Yeah, the virus.
Yeah. So
or the vaccine, I guess.
Yeah. So it's a good question. I tried to answer this a couple weeks ago, and I want to get into it. Most people who get the virus do well. Right? They're asymptomatic. Some people get the symptomatic virus. You were symptomatic. You knew you had it. You actually came and tested with us at Arizona Pain and got tested, and we found out that you had the virus. Most people do well, but some people start to get really sick, and I get a lot of questions. I've had this question 50 times this year, unfortunately. Hey, I'm sick. What do I do? And I try to do the best I can to help people. Number 1, you can take care of yourself at home. I've posted before, and I can maybe put the links below. You can take lots of fluids, Gatorade, Pedialyte, vitamin D, vitamin C, quercetin, melatonin. There's like natural things you can do at home. You probably should get some sort of way to take your vitals. A pulse ox is super important. I put my finger up because you put it right on your finger and it tells you how much oxygen's in your blood. When I was in New York, my oxygen fell into the 80s, which was really bad, and I was a little bit nervous. I thought about going to the hospital a couple of times. You can get blood pressure device at home. You can check your heart rate. It's not that hard. I actually have an entire EKG set up at my house. I mean, I'm an anesthesiologist, so that's like one of my fun toys. But it's not that hard. You can buy a $100 monitor on Amazon to take your heart rate, your blood pressure, and even your EKG. And so if you look at your vitals and your heart rate's over 100, that's a pretty good time to go to the hospital. If your oxygen is less than 90, that's a pretty good time to go to the hospital. If your blood pressure is less than 90 over 60, that's a good. These are just general numbers. But if your vitals start to get bad, you can go to the hospital. If you can't keep food down, you're vomiting, you get dehydrated, that's a time to go to the hospital. If you stand up and feel super dizzy, you might be dehydrated. So these are things that I tell people who are reaching out to me, like anytime your vitals are dropping or you can't keep food down, that's probably the time to go get treatment.
Yeah. Well, and so something that was helpful for me, a pulse ox is like $15 or something like that at Walgreens, give or take. And so I tested it probably 5 times an hour for the first day or two. Yeah. And just because
Did it ever drop?
Yeah, it actually did. So the lowest it got was 92, 93.
Wow.
And then when I kind of turned the corner and was getting better, it was then stable at about 97, 98. So it definitely dropped.
What do you normally?
I don't know, because I don't test it normally, right?
Yeah.
But like since then, I've been about 97, 98. But that's something that I've kind of had in my head, is that's kind of a really strong indicator. If your pulse ox goes down below 92,
yeah,
go to the hospital.
I'm glad you brought that up. Most people don't know that 92 is not like an A in school. Like we think of it, 92. Oh, that's pretty good, 92%. It's a logarithmic curve, and it's a long conversation. But 92% means that you actually have about 65 or 70% of the amount of oxygen you're supposed to have in your blood. Not 92%. It's just, and so, anyways, we could get into it on a future video. But 92 is actually really low.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so a couple more questions here. Is the coronavirus as bad as the Spanish flu?
Yeah, that was a great question. I got that question a couple weeks ago, and I actually tried to answer it on a video that got blocked by Facebook. But it's when all this first hit in March and April of last year, everyone was debating and talking, and people were throwing around the Spanish flu comparisons. And a lot of people said, oh, it's crazy. It'll never be like the Spanish flu. The answer is it's actually probably going to be as bad as the Spanish flu, at least in the United States. We got hit disproportionately hard. Like I showed you the numbers earlier, 4,000 deaths in the United States alone. It was like 4 times the next closest country. So if you look globally at the Spanish flu, I mean, oh my gosh, it killed probably 5 to 10% of people that got it. It infected 500 million people in the world and 20 to 50 million deaths. So Spanish flu, 20 to 50 million deaths. It's crazy. We're only at like 2 million on the coronavirus so far. So globally, I don't think it'll be as bad as the Spanish flu. But in the United States had 675,000 deaths from the Spanish flu. And so far, if you look at the estimates from IHME, by May 1st, we're going to have 600,000 dead from coronavirus. That's just reported actual death certificates that say coronavirus. The actual impact will be 1.5 times that with other coronaviruses that weren't diagnosed plus other deaths. So our year-over-year number will be closer to 900,000, 800,000 or 900,000, which will exceed the Spanish flu. So long story short, within the United States, the coronavirus is going to be worse than the Spanish flu, but around the world, it won't be.
Okay. So it's really bad.
It's really bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, now the fun questions.
Yay, good. Let's see if we get blocked.
Was the virus made in a lab? And then the second question, is gain of function research real? So those kind of related, but your belief is that you got your video got censored on Facebook because of how you answered this question. Was the virus made in a lab?
Yeah.
So try again.
So I'm gonna try again and let's see what happens. So I think we should have a little bit of a conversation about this, and I think we should be having a debate in this country about censorship and social media and what we're allowed to say, the First Amendment, violence and protection of people. I mean, these are like deep, deep conversations. We may not get into all of it today, but just to be clear, my video was blocked a couple weeks ago very clearly because of my answer on was this made in a lab. I know because I clicked on it, said here, find out here why you were blocked, and then I went and read and it said because you said this might be made in a lab and this was not made in a lab. Dang it. And so
But did you say it was made in a lab?
No, I actually said maybe.
Maybe.
And so I think maybe is a very scientific construct, right? Maybe. Everything's maybe. I think we should question the status quo. I want to tell a quick story. I'm an interventional pain doctor, and I treat a lot of people who are suffering in pain. So I want to be careful on how I tell this story. I have a lot of followers and friends in pain. But I believe that in the United States from 1996 to about 2013, we mismanaged the opioid crisis. We threw opioids at every single person that walked through the door, and we hurt a lot of people. There are some people that need pain pills. I have a lot of patients that are suffering with cancer or debilitating diseases, and they do need pain medicine, but we've overused it. And I started teaching that when I was still a fellow, but I wasn't the full doctor. I was like a fellow. I was a doctor, but I wasn't like a full-fledged board-certified pain doc, and I started teaching this concept. And I was basing it, Austin, based on math. I was looking at the data. I was tracking it. The CDC was tracking some data at that time, and I started putting together calculations and tables. And I presented at the Texas Pain Society in 2006 when I was still a fellow and said, we should really be questioning how we're using opioids. And literally they got up and yelled at me. I had doctors tell me that I was a heretic, that I was wrong, that I was unscientific, and that, that I shouldn't be talking this way. That's kind of the way I felt with Facebook a couple weeks ago. Like, I'm talking about something that I think we should look at, and they're saying, no, this is wrong. What was interesting was 6 or 7 years later, the CDC came out and said everything that I was teaching that day was right, that we should be careful with opioids, that a lot of people were dying, and end up that I was right. But I had to be willing to buck the system to push against, what is known in order to do that. So there's a difference between questioning and then just blatantly circulating misinformation, things that aren't true, that are easy to debunk. And so I think that's the balance, is having a conversation. And so I want to get into it a little bit and actually answer your question. So was it made in a lab? I'll say what I said then, which is that's a hard word to say, preponderance of evidence demonstrates that this virus occurred naturally. And you can dig into the science, but they've completely sequenced this DNA genome, and you can see that there were random variations that occurred multiple parts throughout it that created this deadly SARS-CoV-2. If it's made in a lab, there's usually pretty good science where a section was cut and deleted, and you can see the old one. They pretty much know where it came from. There was the SARS-CoV closest viral sequence came from a bat in China. It has like 96% overlap, and then there were some variations that happened probably randomly. And so all the scientists look at it and say, yeah, we think this came naturally. However, and this is a big however, one of the most secure labs in the world, like one of 5 in the world that does gain-of-function research, that takes viruses, that archives them, that studies them, that researches them, that changes them, that does gain-of-function research, is located in Wuhan. And they are the experts in the world on the virus that looks the most similar to that. And for scientists to question whether or not it came from that is not unscientific and should not be a blockable event. I think scientists should look at it. Matter of fact, I pulled up all the data on the CDC website. I looked at all of the stuff, preparing for today. Normally what would happen is if there was even a question, they would do a full investigation. They would go through the lab. They would interview all the employees. They would take swabs. None of that's happened. And none of that's happened because it's China. And China's like, no, they have shut it down. They have not allowed that to happen. There was an article today or yesterday in the AP, you can go look it up, where an organization from the World Health Organization finally went to the lab and interviewed some people. They had no access to any of the frontline workers. I mean, it definitely, it smells funny to anyone who has a logical brain to say, is it possible? Sure. I made the analogy, it would almost be like if you came to the neighborhood and there was a lady dead in the street, and they went and knocked on the door of the husband, and he said, can't come in, lock the door. And then you took the body and you went to the morgue, and the mortician said, yeah, it looks like it was a heart attack. But they were never allowed to go interview the husband. They were never allowed to do anything. It's just a dead body. Everyone would question that. And that's kind of what I'm saying here, is we should at least be asking the questions.
Yeah. And Facebook didn't like that.
Facebook didn't like that because it gets into the politics and Trump and Democrats and Republicans and all these issues where, we want to blame China. And I get that, but I think we should at least be asking the questions and having the conversation. The real conversation that I want to have is gain-of-function research.
So just to summarize all that, for the record, was the virus made in a lab?
I don't think so. I think that the science shows that it evolved naturally, and I think this is going to happen over and over and over again over the next 20, 30 years. We do need scientists that are looking at this stuff. But I think
all that to say, maybe it's
possible.
Maybe,
and I think we should have done a full investigation. I still think we need to do a full investigation, because if it did escape, we need to start having a conversation of how do we keep this from happening in the future, which I think is the second part that we want to talk about now.
Yeah, so gain-of-function research.
So I said it really fast when I got here, gain-of-function. So gain of function. That means there are doctors, like evil Frankenstein-type doctors in the world, that go in a lab and they play with viruses, and their job is to make them stronger. Did you know that?
I didn't know that until you told me.
Right. Most people don't know that. And most people don't know it because we're not having honest conversations about it. We're getting blocked for even bringing up the possibility. There are doctors that their whole entire job is to take a virus and make it worse. And there are 2 reasons they do that. Number one, because if you understand the viruses and you study the viruses, when coronavirus hits, We have a rapid response. Why do you think we got a vaccine within a year? Everyone acts like that's like some kind of conspiracy. It's not a conspiracy. There are people out there, that's their whole life. They're waiting for this moment. Like, they're waiting, sitting there. Like, when a virus comes out, we know how to sequence it. Like, do you know that they completely sequenced this and put it on the internet for free for everyone in January of last year?
Wow.
We knew exactly what it looked like. We knew the entire DNA, all the nucleotides. And so they're people, this is what they do. So that's kind of cool that they study it and they understand it. And when we get hit with Ebola or SARS or H1N1, we rapidly go into, protect mode. But there's a second, more insidious reason, which is for bioterrorism and biowarfare. And every country in the world is aware that, the next kind of nuclear arms race is on the biologic side. And so whether it's Israel or Korea or Russia or the United States or China, there are scientists that are trying to make viruses to kill people. That's crazy. And so we need to have these conversations that there's overlap. So if you take just the United States, you may not know this. So this is an exciting conversation if you like this stuff. In the year 2014, we had a couple really bad outbreaks in some of our labs. We had anthrax escape in the United States. We in 2014, we found 16 vials of smallpox in just like a storage closet at the CDC. 16 vials of smallpox. We shipped the wrong drug across the country that was like a really virulent version of the bird flu, and we just sent it to the wrong lab. Like, this is all out in the data. I'll actually put a link below for people who want to read this. So the federal government in 2014 made the decision to ban gain-of-function research in the United States. And a lot of ethicists said that was the right move. We're not going to do it. We're not going to study it. That was reversed in 2017. So the federal government went back and said, we can probably do it if we're careful. So in the United States today, it is legal to do gain-of-function research on viruses, which means it is okay to take like the HIV molecule and see if you can make it go airborne. Like, does that scare you a little bit?
A little bit, yeah.
And what's even scarier is escaping from a lab is not just like from a movie. It happens all the time. I'm going to put a link below on a story. I don't know if you know much about smallpox, but smallpox probably killed 500 million people between 1877 and 1977. 500 million people. It's like the worst. It's way worse than COVID, right? And in 1977, we eradicated smallpox from the planet. 1977. In 1978, a lady died of smallpox. It was eradicated from the planet. How did she die? She lived in a building where they had a lab doing research on smallpox, and the smallpox escaped and got her. And because smallpox kills you rapidly, amazingly, by the grace of God, she was the only one that died. She went to the hospital, died quickly. Oh. They quarantined everyone else. They almost had another outbreak of smallpox. They killed 500 million people, and we got it off the face of the earth, but they still had it in a lab, and they were studying it, and escaped, and it killed one lady in 1978 in England. You can go look that story up. In 2014, it happened in the United States where they found 16 vials just sitting there. By the way, you know what happened in the story? They took it, they put it in a box, and they took it to the supervisor's office and put it on his desk. Can you imagine how mad would you be if someone just dropped off smallpox on your...
Don't get that anywhere near me. I don't want that.
And so these are just crazy stories that aren't made up. These are not like controversial. They're facts that when you're studying this stuff, there's a chance that it could leak. As a matter of fact, between 2007 and 2012, I think it was, I might be getting the dates wrong. It was a 7-year period. The CDC had 1,000 cases presented to them of an escape or a leak or some sort of contamination, 1,000 cases. So if we're going to do gain of function research, we need to have a debate about a society. We need to understand it. And a lab like Wuhan that's doing gain of function research, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, if there's a huge outbreak near that, for us to question whether it may be escaped from the lab is not insane and it's not controversial.
Well, having that background helps too, like that these practices actually happen in the U.S., around the world. And it sounds like that there was some legislation that stopped that, and now we're doing it again.
We're doing it.
But I think
we're doing it right now.
Yeah, I think to your point, we should talk about it.
We should. If you had a nuclear reactor behind the school where your kids go to school, you would all know about it, and there would be people that would be, upset, and there would be some people saying it's important, it's a good source of energy, and there would be a debate. No one's having a debate about gain of function research because no one knows it's happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what I would ask is why. Right? Is it politics? Is it big business?
I think it scares people. And I think the government probably doesn't want to have a conversation with us that they actually are researching viruses to make them stronger, to maybe use them in a war in the future or prevent a war.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, that's all the questions I had for today, Paul. And again, this was kind of re-summarizing some of the questions in your video that got banned or censored by Facebook. So appreciate you going through those.
Austin, thanks for being July 1, and thanks again for helping me. I think as we can have this conversation about it, I think this will be helpful for our users. Guys, if you found this interesting today, I encourage you to share it. Information doesn't travel as fast as misinformation on the internet, but you can help by sharing this with your friends and family. Continue to follow me. I'll do the very best I can to update you guys. God bless you. Stay safe and get vaccinated.